Welcome to Vermont Today. I'm your host, Terence Jeroloman, and for this episode of Vermont Today, my guests are Ken Lawless and Joe-Henry Nunes. Ken is a college professor and a poet, and he's going to read some of the poetry he's written, and he's also a singer. Ken, would you like to tell our audience a little bit about your background, what you're going to do?
Well, specifically today I'm here to plug a couple of songs from my new CD, Thesaurus Rex. And specifically, This Land Was Stolen From You and Me, which I believe we have on the lectern there. Now, I wrote that last year to celebrate Woody Guthrie's 100th birthday on July 14th. And I hope it's the kind of song Woody would have written if he were alive today. The next song, Dr. Drone Love, I began to write in my head several months ago at the Unitarian Church. Media Benjamin, a founder of Code Pink, was there talking about her drone tour. She and other peace activists had gone to the tribal regions of Pakistan, just across from the Afghan border, where military drones, Predator and/or Reaper drones, were attacking villages with Hellfire missiles. I've reduced that to about a 3-minute protest that you're about to hear. Media Benjamin has since written a book, Drone Warfare, Killing by Remote Control, with an extensive bibliography. And you could find that in the Fletcher Free Library. But let's hear This Land Was Stolen From You and Me, and Dr. Drone Love, please.
This land is not your land. This land is not my land. It belongs to the super rich, from the Hamptons on Long Island, from palatial estates in Palm Springs and Beverly Hills. They control politicians, financiers, and shills. We're exploited by the haute bourgeoisie. This land was stolen from you and me. Endless war keeps us deep in debt. Our great-grandchildren, they'll be paying yet. There's industrial pollution in our land, air, and sea. From our full-spectrum dominance, no one on earth is truly free. This land was stolen from you and me. Working people are under attack. Austerity is the weapon, blue collars get the sack. Our pensions are eroded, migrant workers are scapegoated. The American dream is a fossilized memory. This land was stolen from you and me. Workers create the wealth, that much is certain. Yet we're ruled by Monsanto and Halliburton, by ExxonMobil, by JP Morgan Chase. Only rats can run in Wall Street's rat race. It's a rat-infested plutocracy. This land was stolen from you and me. We live in a sold-out and bought land under the Royal Bank of Scotland. It was bailed out by $170 billion. That's our cue when everybody hollers. No bank is too big to fail. No banker is too rich to jail. Criminal bankers looted our treasury, trashed our economy, used LIBOR illegally. This land was stolen from you and me. Corporate executives dwell in marble halls, but their mugshots should be on post office walls. For wage theft hijacking, for hydrofracking, for empty factories rusting, for union busting, for assassinations by predator drones, for extraordinary renditions to torture zones, for wars, ferocious atrocities. This land was stolen from you and me. from vast oceans to wheat fields rolling, from Alaska to the Caribbean Sea. This land was stolen from you and me.
Well, Ken, that was very interesting. Is there more coming up?
Yeah, we should get Dr. Drone Love. It's the next track, track 3.
Okay, we're going to do the next one, Dr. Dronelove.
Yes, please.
Everyone on Obama's kill list is there for suspicious activity. Suspected of what by whom is kept secret by duplicity. If the Obama administration has a legal explanation for drone assassination, it has yet to reveal it. Many of us do not believe it would be credible, so they use secrecy to conceal it. Predator and Reaper drones launch Hellfire missiles whose detonation leaves not bodies, just flesh. Drones sometimes launch a quick second attack to kill rescue workers, whose remains must be sifted through a wire mesh. Don't let Dr. Dronelove kill families anywhere on Earth. Don't let Predator and Grim Reaper drones kill anything alive. We'll never have peace until the only drones are worker bees making honey, with the queen bee in the hive. As many as half of the Guantanamo detainees were approved for release years since. Hunger strikers are force-fed by tortures so painful that details would make you wince. They've never been charged or convicted in a court of law. If you believe in human rights, that ought to stick in your craw. Many drones crash before reaching their destination. Yet Homeland Security wants to provide drones to every police force in the nation. We can't let drones fly over our homes because some of them crash. Drones should be dismantled, their parts recycled as trash. Today's joystick pilots sit in ergometric chairs to be comfy while they are killing. As crazy as that is, there's crazier to come from a coalition of the willing. Planners are designing robot drones with no joystick pilot, just programmed with targets in advance. Will they kill enemies or innocents? Only foreigners will take that chance. John Brennan is Dr. Dronelove, wielding the CIA's lethal iron fist. Robot killing machines should not exist. Don't let Dr. Dronelove kill families anywhere on Earth. Don't let Predator and Grim Reaper drones kill anything alive. We'll never have peace until the only drones are worker bees making honey with the queen bee in the hive.
Thank you, and I say again, the source for that is Medea Benjamin's Drone Warfare, Killing by Remote Control, extensive bibliography, lots of quotes, real information. You can get a copy in the Fletcher Free Library.
Who is Medea Benjamin?
She's the founder of Code Pink, and it's been vastly important. I mean, basically it's a, women for peace, but it's everybody for peace. It's very well organized. They have like 3 national headquarters and everything. It's been very influential nationwide.
I was especially, as you were reading Dr. Dronelove, I thought of bin Laden. The American principle is you're innocent until proven guilty, and everybody has a right to a trial by jury. They could have brought him back for trial, but instead they went over to Pakistan and just murdered him.
Well, the FBI's website concedes that Osama bin Laden had nothing to do with the 9/11 attack. As soon as it happened, he said he was happy that it happened. I mean, he's an enemy of ours, but he had nothing to do with the attack. Almost all of the people in the attack were Saudis, as he is, but he hadn't been in Saudi Arabia for years. He had gone to Afghanistan when the Russians were there and worked in the caves, and we provided them with Stinger missiles, and we finally drove the Russians out. At that time, we called them Mujahideen freedom fighters because they were fighting the Russians. But the instant the Russians were gone, we decided that they were terrorists. Well, they don't have our best interests at heart, so they are terrorists. It's just that we have to remember that violence begets violence, and a lot of this violence is ours. And most of us who are opposed to violence are opposed to everyone's violence. So
You emphasize the biased approach there, though. They've said one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter.
Yes.
And you said they don't have our interests at heart, therefore they're terrorists. But if
no, they're terrorists because they set off bombs in Bali to kill tourists in order to attract attention to their cause. They're like other terrorists, like the IRA provost. I mean,
or how about like people who would send a drone to kill a target and be happy to kill all his family and his children and everybody in the neighborhood?
Well, when he was being confirmed as director of the CIA, John O'Brien, he first denied that there were civilians being killed by the drones. Now, both Pakistan and Hamid Karzai's government in Afghanistan have been complaining about the drones, and Reuters and the UPI keep telling how many civilians are being killed by these. So he finally admitted that maybe there were, a few collateral damages they cause it. But it's much more than that, much more insidious than that.
In the case of bin Laden, I thought was particularly important because if he had, they could have captured him, and if they had brought him back for trial, the whole issue would have come up with, well, who really did cause the attack on 9/11? And there are people who say, maybe it wasn't even the Arabs who planned it. It's even been asserted that it might be a false flag operation.
Well, because bin Laden needed kidney dialysis, they were pretty sure where he was. So if they had wanted to capture him for all those years, they could have gone and surrounded the hospital and taken him without shooting anybody when he came out. So yes, there's some questions about why they let him go for so long.
And the issue is very current right now because of Snowden, who just got asylum in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine if Snowden goes on TV with Vladimir Putin to talk about his asylum case. Is Obama going to send a drone there and wipe out Putin at the same time he wipes out Snowden?
Snowden has promised Putin that he'll keep his mouth shut while he's in Russia, so that won't happen, but it's a good question.
Well, I saw one of the members of the House of Representatives on TV, and he pointed out that our government doesn't really want to capture Snowden. They're very likely to try to kill him.
Well, the interesting thing is no one denies that the documents released by Bradley Manning and Snowden, no one says that they aren't authentic, that they aren't actually what our ambassadors were saying, or their actual emails, or their actual telephone conversations. That is, they don't say, well, this is fraudulent, they made it up, we didn't say that. They don't deny any of that. They just say, well, those were secrets and they shouldn't have come out. Well, the government is too secret. If we pay them to do these things and they're done in our name, the public ought to have them without NASA or Bradley Manning downloading them, however they do that, about which I understand nothing.
If I can make a comment, and I find it striking is that there's no one who has the political ability to grant immunity to know the truth. It's not like anyone on the Judiciary Committee or any of these committees that has been lied to by NSA says, NSA is telling me something, I'm bound to my constituency to find out what the truth is. I have the ability to give immunity from prosecution in return to know the truth. And you're not seeing Dianne Feinstein or Senator Leahy on a plane to Russia to offer immunity in exchange for the truth. And to me, that makes them just as complicit as the government, because they're, in our government structure, you're supposed to have these checks and balances. Legislatures are supposed to be accountable to us, and the executive branch to whatever. And I think when they fail to do that, there doesn't seem to be a lot of traction to actually want to know the truth. It seems to be as how the power structures are going to align either to capture him and all this stuff, instead of actually just wanting to know the truth. I think you brought up a very good point about, you know, it's not like they're denying this stuff isn't true.
No, it's true.
You know what I mean? But the thing is Snowden has the ability to say, put it all together in context, so that, yes, you know, the NSA is lying to you. NSA is lying to the American people. They seem to be somewhat out of control, where they can go to Congress and actually lie to them. And that because you don't know or do not have access to this classified information cannot, you know, verify that they're lying to you, even though they are. So I think that the missing piece is amnesty for prosecution for Snowden. If we really ever want to know the truth, you know, we want to know is, why did he decide to lose his lucrative job, you know, to do that? What was his motivation? Obviously, it wasn't espionage. They're saying espionage, but he didn't gain anything monetarily.
Well, far from amnesty, I think the only promise President Obama made was that Snowden wouldn't face the death penalty if he came back,
encouraging.
because they were still talking about the death penalty for Bradley Manning, although I don't
That
think
seems to be off the table.
that seems to be off the table. Well, good. They could give him the Medal
It's
of
99 years.
They could
so-
give him the Medal of Freedom, as far as I'm concerned. He deserves it more than Bill Clinton.
I think your first song here is very relevant. This land was stolen from you and me. The song is sung to the tune of "This land was your land, this land was my land."
Yes,
This
the
land
editor, Diane, put a cover of a book about that. It's a very famous song. Many people think it should be our national anthem.
But right in here, you say it's a plutocracy, and that's the
It
whole
is.
problem. It isn't your land and my land anymore. It's the billionaires' land. It's the land of the 1%. They have all the money. They have all the power. They control the government.
But then if you're going to make that argument, you have to say that it's been stolen twice. It was stolen first from Native Americans, and then
Oh, it was.
Then it was stolen by the pioneers and all the immigration that came to this country and built something, and then third, then it's being again now being stolen from people by big banks and big interests and all that. I think you have to do it that way.
That's
'Cause
100% right. Yeah.
That's a much more honest way of looking at it.
But that's the old saying, you know, there's no honor among thieves.
Correct.
So we stole it from the Indians 300 years ago. We stole it from the British 200 years ago.
Yeah.
And now the billionaires are stealing it from
Us.
us. I like this song. It's very current.
Thank you.
Ken, I think our listeners would like to know a little more about your background. You have a very interesting background. You were an Andrew Mellon Fellow
At the University of Pittsburgh.
at the University
yes.
of Pittsburgh, and then you taught at the Michigan State University
Yes,
and at City College.
yes. Yeah, at Michigan State, I had several books published. Now, those were sort of primitive days, so they were mimeographed and stapled and put together lovingly by hand. One of them, Tailing Off Poems, I like very much. My anti-war poem, The Orange Horse, was on the cover of the alternative newspaper. They had the Daily Spartan, but they had a weekly paper, THE paper, and they published The Orange Horse, and you could still Google about it. That's where I found this about my appearance at the Wilkes College. My brother-in-law taught there, and we were raising money for Gene McCarthy's presidential campaign, which did very well. He did well enough in New Hampshire that was one small factor in Lyndon Johnson deciding not to run. But then Hubert Humphrey was running on the politics of joy, which wasn't fooling anybody because he'd been a stooge for the Vietnam War all along. So the only peace candidate was Eugene McCarthy. And the big-time Democrats didn't think he could be elected president, and they probably didn't want him to be elected president. He was, by the way, another poet opposed to the war. And that convinced Robert Kennedy to get in. And, of course, that didn't work out well.
Well, that was the time of Watergate. If some people think that if Watergate hadn't happened, Eugene McCarthy wouldn't have gotten the Democratic nomination, right?
Well, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
We don't know.
But that Watergate break-in was, if that was exposed, and if it were today, they would be in a dungeon somewhere. So we've gone downhill instead of learning from the experience of Watergate. We've gone the other way.
Well, the Watergate thing was awful, and after it was a mistake not actually voting articles of impeachment against Nixon. It was a mistake to let his hand-pointed vice president, Gerald Ford, pardon him. Because the next thing you know, he was on Monday Night Football. They sent him to Sadat's funeral as if he were as respectable as anybody else. Somebody should have said, besides being a drunken foul mouth, which we found out from Seymour Hersh's The Price of Power, it's a shame that he wasn't punished for his crimes, as he could have been.
But I also think that he kind of ushered in this Republicans as bullies. I think that Nixon was very much a bully, and I think that he kind of ushered in this aspects that Republicans get things done because we're tough, but I think tough is just another word for we're bullies.
Well, he was pretty tough in Congress when he was on the DICE committee, the House Un-American Activities Committee.
Yeah, he worked with Eugene McCarthy.
He worked with Eugene McCarthy in the
Mm-hmm.
witch hunt. Yes, he was a nasty piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
But if you compare the politics of today, Nixon was a real left-winger. He put through the HUD public housing bill, I think, and now even the Democrats, Obama seems to be on the right of where he was.
Well, Nixon was sensible enough as a politician, whatever he thought of it, to know better than to try to destroy FDR's New Deal and what there was left of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, which had a war on hunger and a war on poverty. I still remember the headline on one of the New York tabloids, "War on Poverty Over, Poverty Wins." But anyway, those were idealistic things, and they were actually put into law, and programs were put in place, and he didn't attack them. It was Ronald Reagan who said he was going to destroy all of that, the New Deal and those other things. And I'm afraid he certainly damaged them and turned us in a whole other direction as a society. So
I think that he kind of ushered in the greed of the Republican Party.
I think so.
He pretty much,
so.
because also the 80s were kind of that decade of yuppies and self-enriching, and he brought in deregulation, was nothing more than just, get all these little players out of the way so we can have big players that are nothing more than kind of that 99%, 1% kind of thing that he ushered in. He also ushered in the biggest, expansion of the military, which was spend, 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 spend.
Speaking of which, shall we get on to the F-35?
Sure, that's a good intro.
Yes, it
Spending.
is. All right. Well, what I have here are the Lockheed Martin Sandia Corporation technical details of the F-35, which is scheduled to be deployed at the Burlington airport. Let's see a picture we have of it there. And I'll talk only about the nuclear bomb.
The picture of the control tower at the airport is right behind us here.
Yes, yes. All right. This is a B-61 upgrades 11 and 12 thermonuclear up to 340 kiloton implosion bomb. Now let's compare that to the bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bomb that destroyed Hiroshima, Little Boy, was 15 kilotons. And the bomb that destroyed Nagasaki, Fat Man, was 21 kilotons. So the two together were 36 kilotons, and they're talking about a 340 kiloton, almost 10 times the destructive power. Now, I don't think that should be deployed anywhere. I'm with Dr. Helen Caldecott. If you love this planet, we can't have weapons like this around. But they're planning to put one here unless we can convince them otherwise. So please, when we argue against the F-35, there are lots of legitimate arguments. But just remind them that it's carrying an atom bomb. You don't have to say it's 340 kilotons, although that's very impressive since it's over 10 times what they had at Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And as we found out at the candle boat ceremony, those two bombs killed 200,000 people in the first 10 days or so, and then began killing them more slowly from radiation sickness and cancers. Oh, and Hiroshima had an army base, and it was where the Navy shipped people out so Japan could, you know, conquer for their co-East Asia prosperity sphere, they called it, although a lot of us remember the Bataan Death March and the rape of Nanking instead. Oh, and the Comfort Girls. So anyway, let's try and put a spoke in the wheel so that they don't deploy the F-35 and its neutron bomb anywhere.
Ken, you mentioned the candle boat ceremony. I don't think everybody knows what that is. That's the memorial for Nagasaki, which we held here in Burlington on August 9th at the waterfront near the boathouse. Would you like to tell people a little bit about that?
Well, basically, it's a Japanese ceremony. And when the Japanese are in mourning, they take little boats and they put little candles on them and they float them around. Oh, it's sort of the way Roman Catholics light candles in church. I mean, there's nothing about it, but we want to use their ceremony as in respect, and I would hope atonement for dropping the two bombs, the only two bombs that have ever been used on people.
Yeah, we say we don't, we only did that to end the war, and now we don't believe in nuclear war anymore, but you know, we still have nuclear war. The depleted uranium that's being used in Afghanistan and Iraq, that's...
Oh, there are terrible birth defects in Iraq because of the depleted uranium, and when they had the wars in the Balkans, there were Belgian peacekeepers who were suffering from some kind of radiation because of the radiation. And they really think that a lot of the Gulf War syndrome comes from just sitting on the boxes of ammunition. The depleted uranium is good for, it's one of the hardest surfaces on Earth, so they use it in the shells that they fire, the anti-tank shells. But it's also, the radiation is dangerous to the people who are firing the shells as well as the people who are being killed by the shells. So
And it's been reported that the Pentagon is currently planning a preemptive attack against China, to carpet bomb the whole country with nuclear weapons, and that will end our problem of they have our, they've loaned us so much money after a billion people are dead, they won't be able to collect the money. Do you think that's the plan that...
Well, I don't know. A long time ago, Len Dayton wrote a thriller. It's called an expensive place to die, which was Paris. But what they had were the Pentagon's fallout figures. And the figures they were releasing were much too low. Not enough strontium, not enough cesium, not enough petroleum or plutonium. Because we had found out that the Chinese, now this is fiction, mind you, but we had found out that the Chinese were developing a plutonium bomb. And the problem with using nuclear weapons in China is that after you blow up the major cities, they have so much population, and so many of them are in rural villages in the West, that they're still going to have 600,000 people that you would have to go there and, you know, conquer with a land army, and that's out of the question. We couldn't do it. So the plan was to go all the way to the west of the country and drop 400 what they call dirty bombs that had more than the usual amount of fallout. And then as the fallout came, it would kill, well, not everybody in China, but enough to make them deter them. This was a long time ago. This was in the 50s when they thought this up. But it's the kind of thinking, you know, Edward Teller's kind of thinking. The question has always been, can a nuclear war be won? Reagan was convinced it could be won.
Well, because he had his Star Wars plan. You shoot down their missiles.
Helen Caldecott talked to him. And she said, you know, we had a thing recently where the radar picked up, it was actually a lot of geese, and they thought it might be, you know, rockets coming. And he said, well, it's all right, because if we launched the rockets and found out that it was all a mistake, we would simply turn them around or blow them up in the air. And she said, you can't do that. He said, I can't? We can't? No, you can't. Once you launch them, they go wherever you aim them and blow things up. So one of his daughters talked to Helen Caldecott later and said, oh, I love Daddy, but he doesn't bother to, facts don't bother him much. He just has these deeply felt beliefs. Well, I thought, that's all right if you're a clergyman, but it's not very good for a president, I don't think.
Well, Joe-Henry, you have a very interesting background as a member of the Vermont Guard. Would you like to tell our audience a little bit about your personal background?
Well, I you know, for transparency, I always like to tell people that I'm in the Vermont Air National Guard, because I mean, if I'm giving an opinion as a private citizen, I should be able to disclose why I believe the way I believe and who I'm affiliated with. I joined the military not because I believe in war, or I joined the military because it was my ticket out of poverty, and that's why I, like so many today, that the military offers great advantages in our society, because nobody really wants to join the military. So when you're poor, it becomes very attractive to join the military. And I have to say that the military has been very good to me. I mean, as far as education and learning a skill and all of those things. But I have a lot of problems being a citizen soldier or citizen airman. I don't think it really makes a difference. Is that I believe that our role is to safeguard the United States and not the, you know, PAC Americana, which is us going to places all over the world to instill our values upon other people. I think that there's so many more cost-effective ways to use taxpayer dollars to keep us safe and to invest in our children and in actually a lot of the things that you said in your songs. I mean, pensions for the elderly and pensions for everyone, frankly. I mean, everyone gets old. Everyone should have a decent last years of their life. And we're one of the few industrial nations that still does not have universal health coverage for all its citizens, and all of that. And I also believe why I'm against the F-35. There's a part of me that says, if you want these planes bad enough, I could swallow the argument that if you save the $1.6 trillion to pay for them and not borrow the money from China, you know, if it means that much to you, you know, be careful what you wish for, but I would allow you to do that. But the reality is that we don't even do that. We actually do something which I believe is very highly unethical and I would say immoral, because of the fact that we are impoverishing our children and our grandchildren. Because these expenditures could do so much to get children out of poverty, like myself, like so many. Instead, we're going down this road of militarization of our nation, and I think that it is just wrong. It is funnily immoral to put that kind of debt onto our children. I use the analogy is it's like someone that is middle class, like most of us are, or poor, and they say, okay, I want a BMW. And they go to their local, you know, and they get a BMW and take on about $60,000 worth of debt. They make 1 or 2 payments, and then they leave it in their will for their children to inherit their BMW. Well, to bring it to that scenario, well, we're doing the same thing. We're taking on $1.6 trillion for these aircraft. We're going to make 1 or 2 payments, and we're going to leave it on to them. And then if they aren't able to make those payments, then China will just repossess the airplanes. Do I think that that's sound development? No. I think it's ludicrous. Would that kind of money be much more well suited for aqueducts, fast rail, used to improve our infrastructure by making us less and less dependent on fossil fuels? In other words, to create a country that we could be proud that we're leaving. In other words, take back that car, you know, instead of me being greedy, because I think these F-35s does show American greed. Instead of me buying a BMW, why not I buy you, you know, a laptop and put money in the bank for you to go to college, and put some money for myself to have a little bit of money for my retirement so I won't be a burden on you, and all of those things. We're trying to do it the other way, and that is that we live way, way beyond our means. I would argue that these airplanes are way, way beyond our means.
You talk about China repossessing the airplanes, but economics doesn't quite work. That would be if you borrow too much for your car, the bank will repossess it.
Correct.
But there is no legal structure internationally whereby China can automatically repossess the airplane. So what would happen, in order for them to do it, our government would have to say, okay,
Well, no, because they would be buying bond. How that money is, they buy our bonds.
They wouldn't have to seize the airplanes. All they have to do is stop buying our bonds. And then our currency might not be the international currency. It might be the euro, it might be the yuan, or something like that.
But we have these
I
two
mean,
future...
These are just an analogy for people to understand. You know, this is an aircraft that is tremendously expensive over its life cycle, and granted, it's not, you know, every single year it's over its life cycle. It's just like when you buy a car. It's, you know, it's what it's expected to be useful for. You know, and that's $1.6 trillion. You know, that's a lot of money.
But we have the irony that China may be lending us that $1.6 billion per airplane.
Because it's like my original thing. It's not like we have President Obama that says we need to raise $1.6 trillion to buy these aircraft. So we're going to tax the American people more to put in the piggy bank, or you know what I mean, in this $1.6 trillion, because that would never fly. So it's sort of like almost the same gimmick that credit card companies use.
But what will the future
You
actually
know-
be? I would say that we risk the irony that China's lending us this money to buy these airplanes, which will then be used to drop nuclear bombs on China to wipe them out so they can't repossess anything.
Well, but I don't see it that way. I see it that I think you have to understand, China is developing a model of dependency worldwide. That is their model. Our model is probably the same model we probably had pretty much since the 60s. You know, whether it's a Republican in office or a Democrat in office, is we kind of are bullies. I think that we're kind of bullies in the world stage. You do what we only really care about you is if you have resources that we need and we want, and then we will either set coups or do whatever we need to do to make you see our way. It's not a, we're not building like the European Union. We're not building the North American Union. It's not like Canada, Mexico, the US, and all Central America, and open borders and all of that. That's not what we're building. We're building a very isolated kind of society where we're at the top, the richest country in the world. And then you have the way it is, that you have people that the 50 richest Americans have more wealth than the 50 poorest countries in the world. And people think that that's a good thing, you know? And because that's how we've evolved culturally. But the thing is, and I've studied, as a historian, I've studied different societies. I mean, the Portuguese Empire was a perfect example of that. When the world changes and you do not reinvent yourself, you stay the same way. I would argue that's what the United States is doing. And these F-35s are a good example of that. Mm-hmm. You know, it's almost like, if you want to take Rome, for example, you know, where you build this Colosseum that costs so much, you know, and you have to tax the provinces to no end to make it happen, instead of reinventing yourself. We don't want to reinvent ourselves, and I think that will end up being the biggest mistake, because we have tremendous intellectual capital in the United States that could be used to completely change the U.S. And that's another thing about changing the U.S., because these airplanes are a great, they're taking that money that could have been used to, one of the most striking things is, all student loan debt equals $1 trillion. Wouldn't it be just more cost effective to just say, well, we're not going to buy these airplanes, we're just going to forgive $1 trillion of student loan debt. Mm-hmm. And that people can say, oh my God, I'm not saddled with this $80,000 debt. I can go buy a house. Mm-hmm. And in turn, or start this business, or start this, because I'm not saddled with this debt.
I ran for the Vermont State Senate last year, and part of my platform was that the state should make tuition at all of the state colleges free of charge for state residents. Mm-hmm. And in Europe, it is free. Education is free in Denmark and Scandinavia. And why can't we have it here in Vermont? Why can't our students go to school, college for free?
It was in America in the 50s. There was no tuition at state schools in
except
the 50s.
Yale and Harvard.
Well, Yale and Harvard, yes. I'm talking about the state schools.
But we
the
shouldn't have a
land-grant
Yale or
schools.
Harvard. We should have, here in Vermont, University of Vermont, it should be free, and that should be our best
It should.
university.
We have the most expensive schools in the United States. Middlebury College.
Well, the state should pay tuition there too. They do in Europe, and there's an enormous advantage. The doctors, when they graduate from medical school, they don't have this heavy debt hanging over them. They can treat people at a reasonable cost, spend a reasonable amount of time with their patients.
I think that we have a lot of paralysis in the United States because we don't want to change. We want to keep this American exceptionalism alive. As it is withering on the vine, we are trying to keep it alive. And I think that these F-35s are another example of people want them because they want to look at them as my shining star, my American exceptionalism, at the cost of Michigan with cities that are in decay and cities
Detroit
across
facing bankruptcy, and
yeah,
the governor appointing someone to...
and people losing their homes and people going into foreclosure,
Yeah.
and because it speaks of the human spirit. I mean, you know, we don't want to face a changing world. It takes heroic leaders, and frankly, I don't really see that in our leaders that we have heroes, because I think it would be like a hero for Leahy to get on a plane and go to Russia and offer him immunity from prosecution in return for the truth.
Yeah.
That would be a hero.
Well, I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for it to happen, but
Well,
you're
no,
right.
no, that's not what I'm saying. You know, and the other thing is there are trade-offs. I totally understand that, but these F-35s, the trade-off is poverty for a whole generation. That's unacceptable to me. You know, I think some of it is because people aren't being reflective. People have to say, I've had enough. You know, I've had a pretty good life. You know what I mean? I'm not going to buy something to leave to my grandkids to pay. I'm not going to do that. That's immoral to do. And I think that would make us a little bit more honest as a nation. I think that would make us a little more honest. You know, I don't think it's degrading to say, you know, I wish I could give you these airplanes, but I can't because we're broke. You know, because I want to leave you as much more important things that you're going to need. I think that that's much more honest. But politicians are not cut out to be honest. It's very funny. It just, to me, it boggles my mind when you have our whole congressional delegation, Senator Bernie Sanders, who was the champion of, you know, corporate welfare, and F-35s are nothing but corporate welfare. And Senator Leahy, of course he's for the F-35s. Congressman Welch is for the F-35s. Yet, I sometimes think, do they not, is it because they drank the Kool-Aid and they think that they're going to, like, you know, miraculously, they can't even generate $1 trillion in tax cuts over 10 years. They can't even agree to that. I mean, one, and these are 1.6. I understand it becomes like, you know, playing chicken when the cars are coming by, but come on, you know, you're our congressmen, you're our senators. Show some backbone and say, you can't afford these airplanes.
I think a message that we want to give to our viewers is that we should ask them to write to Senator Leahy, Senator Sanders, and Peter Welch, and tell them that we don't want the F-35 here in Vermont. There are many other reasons too. It's a great injustice to the people that live in
we don't want them anywhere.
In the airport area. Okay, so the message I think we want to leave with our audience is that it's important for you to call or write to your legislator and tell them that we don't need or want the F-35 here in Vermont. It's very bad for the surrounding community too. The noise level will drive people out of their homes, and the crash zone hasn't been taken into consideration. A new aircraft like this is predictable that it will there will be accidents, And these airplanes are taking off over the city of Winooski. And imagine if one of these F-35s crashes into the circle there in Winooski. After all the money that's been spent in urban renewal and making that a desirable place to live, and now we imagine if a plane crashes there. And we know that there are going to be accidents. This plane is just, we don't need it, and it's just the wrong thing to have here. And I ask everybody to let your legislator know that we don't want this plane.
Or even yet, show up where they're going to be at. You know, I mean, Congressman Welch was in North Hero, and I was there to challenge him as to the wisdom of why these F-35s should come to Vermont. You need to do that with Senator Leahy. You need to do that with Senator Sanders. I think any of you that have ever been passionate about a cause that has ever written a senator or a congressman, you get a letter back with their signature. That's it. That's it. But I think that senators and congressmen all have conscience. I think if you give a good, passionate speech to them on why these 35s are not good for any state, whether it's Utah or South Carolina or Florida or Vermont, that's a much better thing because of their cost. Because they're trying to approve something on credit in your name. You talk about identity theft, you know? I mean, they want to put our signature on $1.6 trillion. And I think that is wrong.
I think so too.
Well, we all agree on that.
Well, we're agreed on that.
On that note, I think
Well,
we're out of time. So
okay,
I want to thank everybody
just one thing. I'd like to end with an up-tempo celebration of bicycles. All kinds of bicycles. I ride a mountain bicycle. My children, Mary and Shem, ride unicycles. And in 1966, my wife Nan and I lived in Bagnols-sur-Mer, and we saw the Tour de France go by, riding stages in the Pyrenees. So could we hear Mountain Bike Boogie, track 11?
Track 11 coming up.
Pedal, pedal, ignore those brakes. Speed, cliffs, and mile-high
the Tour de
lakes.
France gets corrupted.
Lickety-split down
With
foothills and mountain sides. Splash through streams,
But I think it was Eddie
bump
Merrick
over
on
rock
stage,
slides. Don't care if it rains, cats and dogs. Bushwhack
We're on
through
here.
low down
Oh, are we?
salt over logs. Stand pedal over rocky ridges. Plummet down Tuckerman Ravine to covered bridges. Doing the mountain bike boogie. The daredevil may care. Mountain bike boogie. Pedal your mountain bike up the Ozarks. Coast it down the Alps. For flat tires, broken chains, or repair kit helps. Put your car up on blocks, ride your bikes and take long walks. An ultralight racer for the Tour de France, a unicycle if you get the chance. Bike is a two-wheel solution to industrial pollution. You'll improve your health, you'll enjoy the scene, and never buy another drop of gasoline. As a boy, I couldn't afford a Raleigh or a Schwinn. With hand-me-downs we did begin. Mine was a Hawthorne from Montgomery Ward when the family car was a 28 Ford. The only genuine progress to come next was the mountain bike and the BMX. Ride with pride, knee pedal, wheels and spokes. Ride off-road with mountain bike folks. Ride in the sticks in the suburbs in the mega city. On mountain bikes we're all sitting pretty. Bikes don't pollute the water or the land. Mountain bikes don't need a quick stand. Chlorophyll-free mountain bikes are truly green. They keep our lungs and our landscapes pristine. Ride your mountain bike on an Adirondack trail. If you push it now and then, some summits you can scale. Put your car up on blocks, ride your bikes and take long walks. An ultralight racer for the Tour de France. Unicycle if you get the chance. A bike is a two-wheel solution to industrial pollution. You'll improve your health, you'll enjoy the scene. Never buy another drop of gasoline.
That's very good, Ken. Did you have anything more for us?
No, except enjoy a healthy and prosperous life, and Burlington and Vermont are great places to do that.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming, Joe-Henry and Ken. And that's the end of our episode for today. And I hope our viewers will tune in again for our next show of Vermont Today. Thank you.
This is the song I wrote, imagining what Woody Guthrie might have written today. It's called "This Land Was Stolen from You and Me." This land is not your land. This land is not my land. It's owned by the super rich from the Hamptons on Long Island, from palatial estates to Palm Springs and Beverly Hills. They control politicians, financiers, and chills. We're exploited by their own bourgeoisie. This land was stolen from you and me. Endless war keeps us deep in debt. Our great-grandchildren will be paying it. There's industrial pollution in our land, air, and sea. From our full spectrum dominance, no one on earth is truly free. This land was stolen from you and me. Working people are under attack. Austerity is the weapon. Blue collars get the sack. Our pensions are eroded. Migrant workers are scapegoated. The American dream is a fossilized memory. This land was stolen from you and me. Workers create the wealth. That much is certain. But we're ruled by Monsanto and Halliburton, by ExxonMobil, by JP Morgan Chase. Only rats can run in Wall Street's rat race. It's a rat-infested plutocracy, because this land was stolen from you and me. We live in a sold-out and bought land under the Royal Bank of Scotland. It was bailed out by $170 billion. That's our cue when everybody hollers. No bank is too big to fail. No banker is too rich to jail. Criminal bankers trash the economy, who looted the treasury, used LIBOR illegally. This land was stolen from you and me. Corporate executives dwell in marble halls, but their mugshots should be on post office walls. For wage slip hijacking, for hydrofracking, for empty factories rusting, for union busting, for assassinations by predator drones, for extraordinary renditions to torture zones.